What is the single most important ingredient for building an empire? Is it the might of disciplined legions, marching in perfect synchrony across continents? Perhaps it is the mind of a brilliant emperor, a figure of law and strategy. Or maybe it is the bedrock of a legal code, a system of rules that can bind a diverse people together. While you might think of armies, emperors, or laws, the story of Rome's ascent is inseparable from its mastery over one simple, essential element: water. In this video, we will explore how the engineering marvel of the Roman aqueducts didn't just bring water to a city, but fundamentally changed what a city could be. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe. It is a pleasure to have you with us as we trace the quiet currents of history that shaped the world. After we uncover the core answer to how aqueducts transformed Rome, we will journey deeper to explore three specific windows into this world. First, we'll see what life was like for a Roman before this revolution in water. Then, we will immerse ourselves in the daily social ritual of the grand public baths. And finally, we'll uncover how these structures were used not just for life, but as breathtaking instruments of imperial power. So, how did they change everything? Roman aqueducts provided a vast, constant, and reliable supply of clean water to a concentrated urban center. This was a feat previously unimaginable. This unprecedented control over water enabled a revolution in public health and sanitation through baths, latrines, and sewers, drastically reducing disease. At the same time, this abundance of water allowed the city's population to swell, fueling the construction of massive public works, lavish private homes, and a dense urban fabric that would have been impossible otherwise. It was this mastery that cemented Rome's status as the world's first metropolis. So, to truly appreciate the scale of this change, we must first journey back. We must go to a time before these stone giants marched across the landscape. It's remarkable to consider what we take for granted today. What is one modern convenience related to water that you feel would be the hardest to live without? We'd be curious to read your thoughts in the comments below. Before Rome could command the world, it first had to command its own water supply. This was a challenge that defined its early existence. In those first centuries, long before the age of emperors and grand monuments, Rome was a city in a constant, quiet struggle for survival. It was a thirsty city. The heart of this early settlement was the Tiber River, a winding, murky waterway that gave as much as it took away. Mythologically, it was the river that saved the city's founders, Romulus and Remus. In reality, it was the primary source of life for a growing population. Every day, countless citizens would make their way to its banks, hauling heavy buckets back to their homes. But the Tiber was a deeply flawed source. It was a shared resource in the most troubling sense. For everything it provided, it also served as the city's primary drain. Waste from homes, from workshops, and from the streets all found its way back into the current. The river was a breeding ground for invisible dangers, for the waterborne illnesses like typhoid that could sweep through a neighborhood with silent, devastating speed. To drink from the Tiber was always a gamble. To avoid this risk, Romans turned to other sources. Throughout the city, springs bubbled up from the earth, considered gifts from the gods. The spring of Juturna, in the heart of the Roman Forum, was a sacred and vital source of cleaner water. Beyond these natural springs, the Romans dug wells, deep shafts that tapped into the groundwater beneath the city's hills. This was arduous work. Each bucket of water was earned through backbreaking labor, hoisted from the cool darkness. For most of the populace, this was the daily reality. Water was heavy. It was finite, and acquiring it was a constant chore that dictated the rhythm of the day. The wealthy, as always, had a more elegant solution. In the central courtyard, or atrium, of a fine Roman home, the roof was designed to slope inwards. It channeled precious rainwater into a shallow pool, which then fed into an underground storage tank called a cistern or cisterna. This system offered a degree of self-sufficiency and provided cleaner water than the river. But it was entirely dependent on the whims of the weather. A long, dry summer could leave even the wealthiest households rationing their supply. This constant scarcity placed a hard limit on the city's potential. A city can only grow as large as its water supply allows. For early Rome, this meant its population was shackled, unable to expand beyond what the Tiber, the springs, and the seasonal rains could provide. The Romans did make early attempts at managing their water. The most famous of these was the Cloaca Maxima, or greatest sewer. But its initial purpose was not to carry waste away from homes. It was first built as a massive open-air channel, an enormous ditch designed to drain the marshy, low-lying ground between the hills, making the land suitable for building what would become the Roman Forum. Only later was it covered and integrated into a true sewer system. In its early days, it was a partial solution to a problem of land, not yet a solution to the problem of public health. This was the world of early Rome, a city of great potential, but one that was perpetually thirsty and perpetually at risk. The solution to Rome's thirst was not a new invention, but the perfection of an ancient idea on a scale never before imagined. It was an engine powered by a single, unseen force: gravity. The concept was elegant in its simplicity. If you could find a pure water source at a higher elevation than the city, you could, in theory, guide that water downhill all the way to its destination. This idea became the Roman aqueduct. In the year 312 BC, a Roman censor named Appius Clodius Siccus commissioned the city's very first aqueduct, the Aqua Appia. But if you were to look for it in the landscape, you would have been disappointed. It was not a majestic bridge of towering arches. In fact, for almost its entire 10-mile length, it ran silently underground. It was a hidden channel, a testament to practicality over spectacle. This reveals the first truth of the aqueducts. Over 80% of their combined length across the empire was subterranean. These were not just bridges. They were man-made underground rivers, protected from contamination and the heat of the sun. The engineering behind them was a marvel of precision. The key was the gradient. The channel, known as a spicus, had to slope downwards, but only very gently. Too steep, and the rushing water would erode the channel. Too shallow, and the water would stagnate. The ideal gradient was found to be somewhere between 1 in 200 and 1 in 5,000. A drop of just 1 meter for every 200 meters of length, or in some cases, for every 5 kilometers. To achieve this incredible consistency over dozens of miles, Roman engineers, or architecti, employed sophisticated surveying tools. They used a device called a chorobates, which was a long wooden plank about 20 feet in length, with legs on each end and a groove for water carved into the top. It was, in essence, a massive spirit level, allowing them to ensure a perfectly steady gradient over long distances. For sighting and laying out right angles, they used a groma, a tool that looked like a cross, which helped them plot a straight course. With these tools, they would chart a path that clung to the contours of the land, winding around hills and through valleys whenever possible. When a hill stood directly in their path, they would not go around it. They would tunnel straight through it, chiseling through solid rock with relentless determination. And when the path reached a valley or a low-lying plain that could not be circumnavigated, only then did they build the magnificent arched bridges that have become the iconic symbol of the aqueducts. These arches were a solution born of necessity, a way to carry the channel high above the ground, all while maintaining that precise, gentle, and unbroken downward slope. The water could not be allowed to dip and then rise again. Its journey had to be ever downwards. The construction itself was a monumental undertaking made possible by another Roman innovation, a unique form of concrete known as opus cementitium. This mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and rubble could be poured into wooden frames, creating structures of immense strength and, crucially, making the water channels waterproof. After its long journey, sometimes over 50 miles, the water would finally arrive at the edge of the city, pouring into a large distribution tank called a castellum aquae. From this point, it could be channeled through a network of lead pipes to the fountains, baths, and homes of Rome. The gravity engine had completed its work. With the arrival of the first aqueduct, a torrent of clean water began to wash over Rome, and in its wake, it swept away centuries of disease and filth. This was the gift of Hygeia, the goddess of health. The impact was immediate, and it was profound. As more aqueducts were built over the centuries, the volume of water became staggering. At the height of the empire, 11 major aqueducts converged on the city of Rome. Day and night, they poured over 1 million cubic meters of fresh, clean water into the castella. This amount was so vast that on a per capita basis, it provided more water to each Roman citizen than is available in many modern cities today. This incredible abundance of water transformed daily life, most visibly through the creation of a vast public sanitation system. The water fed over 900 public baths, the famous thermae, which became centers of Roman social life. It supplied nearly 1,200 public fountains, which dotted the city's neighborhoods, providing a constant and reliable source of drinking water for the masses. No longer did the poor have to rely on the polluted Tiber or the labor of a well. Clean water was now a public good, freely available to all. The revolution extended to the most private of needs. Public latrines were built, many of which featured a channel of continuously running water beneath the marble seats. This simple feature constantly washed waste away, dramatically improving hygiene and reducing the stench that had once permeated so many ancient cities. And this new, relentless influx of clean water gave the old Cloaca Maxima a new purpose. The great sewer was now continuously flushed by the surplus from the fountains and baths. It was transformed from a sluggish drainage ditch into a highly effective enclosed sewer system, carrying the city's refuse away and emptying it into the Tiber, far downstream from where drinking water was drawn. The Romans themselves understood the connection between this new reality and their well-being. Thinkers and physicians of the era, like the famous Galen, observed the links between swampy, marshy ground, the bad air that rose from them, and the fevers and diseases we now know as malaria. They promoted the importance of good drainage, and above all, the vital necessity of a clean water supply. The aqueducts were not just a convenience. They were a citywide public health initiative, the greatest and most effective in the ancient world. Life expectancy grew. Infant mortality fell. The city became a safer, healthier, and far more pleasant place to live. The scale of Roman engineering is truly humbling. Are there any ancient feats of construction, Roman or otherwise, that you find particularly awe-inspiring? It would be wonderful to read about them. But the water from the aqueducts was for more than just drinking and cleaning. It was the catalyst for the very soul of Roman public life. It filled the fountains and cleansed the sewers, yes, but its greatest gift was the creation of a new kind of social space, one that would come to define the experience of living in Rome, the public bath. Let us take a journey into one of these magnificent structures. Imagine the baths of Caracalla, a complex so vast it could welcome 1,600 Romans at a single time. As you approach, you are not met with a simple building, but a sprawling estate of marble and mosaic set within lush gardens. The entrance fee, if there is one at all, is a pittance. It is a cost subsidized by the emperor himself, a daily gift to his people. This is a place for everyone. You enter first into the changing room, the appetiterium. Here, the sounds of the city begin to fade, replaced by the low murmur of conversation and the shuffling of sandals on stone floors. Niches line the walls, where you store your clothes and belongings. There is a sense of shared experience. A senator might be disrobing just a few feet from a common merchant, a soldier a few feet from a poet. In the baths, much of Rome's rigid social hierarchy was gently washed away. From here, you might proceed to the palestra, an open-air courtyard for exercise. Here, men would engage in wrestling, weightlifting, or games of ball. The air is filled with shouts of exertion and laughter. This was about preparing the body, working up a sweat before the main event of cleansing. After your exercise, the ritual of bathing truly begins. A slave, or you yourself, would apply fragrant oil to your skin. Then, using a curved metal scraper, known as a strigil, you would scrape away the mixture of oil, sweat, and dirt from your body. Now you are ready for the heat. You enter the tepidarum, a warm, pleasant room that serves as an antechamber. The air here is humid, preparing your body for the intense heat to come. The warmth radiates from beneath the floor, a clever system known as the hypocaust. The floor itself is raised on a forest of short pillars, allowing hot air from a massive furnace to circulate freely underneath, heating the marble slabs you walk upon. Next, you push open a heavy door and step into the caldarium, a hot bath. A wave of thick, dense steam envelops you. The air is heavy and hot, the room echoing with the splash of water and hushed voices. You lower yourself into a pool of steaming hot water, feeling the day's tensions melt away. This was a place for quiet conversation, for business deals to be struck in hushed tones, for political gossip to be exchanged. When the heat becomes too much, you return through the warm room and make your way to the final destination, the frigidarium. This was a grand cathedral-like hall, often the architectural centerpiece of the entire complex, with a soaring vaulted ceiling and a vast, unheated pool of clean, cold water. Plunging into its invigorating depths was a shock to the senses. It closed the pores, refreshed the mind, and marked the end of the bathing ritual. But the day was not over, for these were not just baths. They were community centers. You could wander through art-lined halls, relax in the gardens, read scrolls in the libraries, or buy snacks from food stalls. The Roman baths were the beating heart of the city, a place of health, society, and leisure, all made possible by the ceaseless, flowing gift of the aqueducts. While the grand baths served the masses, the journey of water from the castellum revealed the deep social structures of Roman society. Not every drop was destined for the public good. The distribution of water was a precise science, one that reflected wealth, status, and the intricate hierarchy of the city. From the main distribution tanks, a web of underground pipes, called fistulae, snaked beneath the city streets. These pipes were typically made of lead, a material that was easy to shape and solder. They carried water towards the fountains, the baths, and, for a select few, into private homes. To receive a private water connection was the ultimate status symbol. It was not a right one could simply purchase. It required an official grant from the emperor himself, a mark of immense favor and influence. For a wealthy senator living in a sprawling single-family home, a domus, this grant was transformative. It meant having running water on demand. It filled the decorative fountains in their private gardens, supplied their personal bathhouses, and provided fresh water for their kitchens and latrines. It was a life of unparalleled convenience and luxury. This system, however, was strictly controlled. The state regulated the amount of water a private citizen could receive through a bronze nozzle, or calyx, which was stamped with an official inscription. The size of this nozzle determined the flow, and tampering with it was a serious crime. The entire water supply was overseen by a high-ranking official, the curator aquarum. The most famous of these was a man named Sextus Julius Fontinus, who, at the end of the 1st century A.D., wrote a detailed report on Rome's water system. His work, De Aquis, gives us an incredible insight into the meticulous management, the constant repairs, and the ongoing battle against illegal siphoning of the city's precious water. But this world of private luxury was an island in a vast sea of scarcity. The vast majority of Rome's population, perhaps over 90%, did not live in a domus. They were packed into multi-story, wooden-framed apartment blocks called insulae. These buildings were often crowded, poorly built, and rarely, if ever, had running water. For the hundreds of thousands of people living in these tenements, the reality of water was very different. Their source was the public fountain, the lacus. Every day, they or their slaves would have to make the trip, carrying heavy clay or leather buckets through the crowded streets. The public fountain was a vital neighborhood hub. It was a place of constant activity. It was where you collected water for drinking, cooking, and washing. But it was also a social space, a place to meet neighbors, exchange news, and catch up on the day's events. The gush of clean water from a sculpted fountainhead was a constant reminder of the emperor's provision, but the daily labor required to get it was a constant reminder of one's place in the social order. In Rome, the story of water was a story of two cities: the city of the privileged few with water at their fingertips, and the city of the masses whose lives were still dictated by the daily trip to the fountain. Beyond sustaining life, Rome's mastery of water was also wielded as the ultimate expression of imperial might and divine favor. If providing clean water was a sign of the emperor's care for his people, then manipulating it for pure spectacle was a sign of his absolute power over nature itself. The most staggering example of this was the Naumachia, the mock sea battle. These were not small-scale reenactments. They were colossal, deadly spectacles. Imagine the Colosseum, its vast floor flooded with millions of gallons of water. Or picture a purpose-built basin, a man-made lake dug specifically for the occasion. Upon these waters, specially constructed warships, filled with thousands of prisoners of war or condemned criminals, would engage in real combat. They would fight to the death for the entertainment of the roaring crowds. The first of these was staged by Julius Caesar in 46 BC to celebrate his military triumphs. But later, emperors pushed the scale to unbelievable heights. The Emperor Claudius once staged a Naumachia on the Fucine Lake, a massive battle involving 100 ships and an astonishing 19,000 combatants. To provide the immense quantities of water needed for such events, engineers sometimes built entire aqueducts, like the Aqua Alsitina, which carried water of a lower quality, unsuitable for drinking, but perfect for the arena. This use of water as a tool of propaganda was also present in more serene settings. The elaborate gardens of emperors and the super-wealthy were designed as private paradises, earthly Edens where water was the key element. At Hadrian's villa in Tivoli, the emperor recreated famous sites from his travels across the empire. Vast pools, long canals, and intricate fountains turned the landscape into a living map of Roman power, a private world of beauty and control. Even the public fountains were more than just utilitarian spigots. They were works of art. They were monuments, often adorned with grand sculptures and inscriptions celebrating the emperor who had commissioned the aqueduct that fed them. Every time a citizen filled their bucket, they were met with a marble reminder of imperial generosity. These fountains were the beautiful public face of the aqueduct system, transforming the simple act of collecting water into a daily interaction with the majesty of the state. In all these forms, from the bloody naval battles to the tranquil gardens, water was a medium for a clear and powerful message. Rome and its emperor did not just rule over people. They ruled over the elements themselves. And so, when the empire eventually receded, these stone giants fell silent, but their legacy was never truly forgotten. The aqueduct system was a marvel of engineering, but it was also fragile. Its lifeblood was constant maintenance. As the Western Roman Empire weakened in the 4th and 5th centuries, the resources and central authority needed to manage this vast network began to disappear. The aqueducts became prime targets in times of war. During the Gothic Wars in the 6th century, invading armies understood a simple truth: to conquer Rome, you must first make it thirsty. They deliberately cut the aqueducts. One by one, the channels that had supplied the city for centuries ran dry. The great baths, deprived of water, closed their doors and fell into ruin. The fountains ceased to flow. The sewers, no longer flushed, began to clog. Without its vast water supply, the city could no longer support its massive population. Rome began to shrink. The population plummeted from a bustling metropolis of over 1 million people to a sparse town of as few as 30,000 during the early Middle Ages. The remaining citizens clustered in the low-lying areas near the Tiber, once again dependent on the old, polluted river. For 1,000 years, many of the aqueducts stood as silent, crumbling monuments to a lost age. Yet their presence on the landscape was a constant reminder of a greater past. Some, like the magnificent Pont du Gard in southern France, or the breathtaking aqueduct of Segovia in Spain, survived the centuries in a remarkable state of preservation. They stood as enduring testaments to the genius of their builders. During the Renaissance, as interest in the classical world was reborn, popes and princes began to look upon these ancient structures with new eyes. They started the long process of restoring them. Popes repaired some of the ancient channels, such as the Aqua Virgo, which was reborn as the Aqua Virgin. Today, it still flows, culminating in one of the world's most famous and beloved fountains, the Trevi Fountain. But the true legacy of the aqueducts is more than just the stone that remains. It is the foundational idea they represent, that a great and advanced society has a responsibility to undertake massive, state-funded public works for the health and well-being of its citizens. This Roman model of civil engineering, of harnessing nature on a grand scale for the common good, became a blueprint for the modern world. Every time we turn on a tap, we are, in a small way, living out the legacy of those ancient Roman engineers. When you think of the legacy of Rome, what is the first image or idea that comes to your mind? We would love to know what resonates most with you. The story of Rome's water is a grand tale of engineering, but like all great moments in history, it is also composed of countless individual lives and quiet ambitions. If you find yourself drawn to these more personal journeys from the past, you may enjoy the stories we explore over at Bedtime History. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the stone channels of the past. The Roman aqueduct reminds us that sometimes the quietest, most constant forces are the ones that shape our world most profoundly. If you enjoyed this exploration and wish to join our community of curious minds, we would be honored if you subscribed. Until our next story, stay curious. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the stone channels of the past. The Roman aqueduct reminds us that sometimes the quietest, most constant forces are the ones that shape our world most profoundly. If you enjoyed this exploration and wish to join our community of curious minds, we would be honored if you subscribed. Until our next story, stay curious.